The dream of the Justice League International is alive over at DC Comics in the pages of Fire and Ice Welcome to Smallville. It's been a thrill to watch the comedic stylings of the robot known as Elron operate alongside these titular heroes of Fire and Ice. Things have gotten really interesting for this duo as after a failed mission, these two individuals are headed over to Smallville to open up a salon. While Ice has acclimated really harmoniously over to some of her new surroundings, it looks like Fire is already nostalgic for her superheroing fighting days. Fire is really trying to bolster her social media presence over in the debut chapter of Fire and Ice, and today we're going to analyze if these two individuals are going to be able to work together and operate this salon. My name is Ariko Braddock, and without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into the pages of Fire and Ice Welcome to Smallville Issue 2. This series is written over from Joanne Starer, featuring artwork from Natacha Bustos. We have colors from Tamra Bonvillain, letters from Ariana Maher, as well as a cover coming in directly from Terry and Rachel Dodson. Really like how the Dodsons are able to capture some of the emotion from these two characters over on the comic book page. And I love how some of the comedic stylings of Elron, just as an individual, are featured in the background. It looks like he already has a contingency plan to extinguish some of Fire's flames over in the comic book series. I want to extend a very fast thank you to Adventures in Poor Taste and Preview, some of the excellent artwork coming in from Natacha Bustos. Really think that Bustos does a fantastic job adding this extra element and dimension over to the page. Bustos does an excellent job portraying motion across some of these pages as well. I really think this debut sequence over with Fire, trying to use Ambush Bug to once again sort of bolster her social media presence, is a ton of fun over in the series. Watching Fire manipulate Ambush Bug in this really, I think, misguided sort of way creates so much empathy for his character, and I love how the character of Ambush Bug moves and features facial expressions that look so strange and off the beaten path, plus the introduction of this character known as Cheeks, who is like a visual gag that returns over with Ambush Bug again and again and again, is so compelling to look at on the comic book page. I found that some of these panel bleeds over in the series opened up this extra dimension and texture in some of the page layouts. I was really struck by all the ways Bustos was able to communicate motion across the comic book page. This second page that we have over with Fire and Ambush Bug also does a great job stirring some of the tense emotions between these two. And we really get a glimpse of Fire as the sort of manipulator in this situation, as she gives Ambush Bug a kiss on the cheek to ensure that he delivers a great performance over in the video. The thing that really has me interested about this particular page is that it ends over with this phone screen, which actually serves as the panel transition over for the next page. I think artist Leonardo Romero over from Birds of Prey also utilized some fantastic techniques, just like Jesus Says did over in the latest issue of Captain America. I think this additional page that we have up on the screen is a fantastic way to show how Bustos is able to open up more dimensions on the page. In addition, over to this phone screen transition from the previous page we explored, in the third panel over on the page, we also get a look at an overhead shot of the salon with Tamarind and Elron. I really think that this sequence is written incredibly well for Starer, as Tamarind seemingly puts some of Fire's social media ambitions in check and gives her the reality over in this situation. In the pages of Fire and Ice Welcome to Smallville, I really found that Fire and Ice do a great job attracting some of the opposite story beats. Getting the chance to see Ice in this issue operate alongside her old friend Rocky was absolutely heartwarming. There is a great element of dialogue over to this series, and I also really think that some of the ambition and characterization from Ice really portrays her as a sweet character who's also incredibly dimensional over in this series as well. The fact that she has relationships outside of the context of Fire, I think really helped develop her as a character. We also got some strong characterization for her in the first issue as well. So, really hope that Starer and Bustos will continue to flesh her out as this good and altruistic character who is really establishing, I think, some roots over to Smallville that are maybe a lot more positive than some of the relationships that Fire is starting in the series. This is a really fantastic transition to talk about Rocky's brother, Charlie, who is actually featured over in this series as Fire ends up heading over to a bar where she ends up meeting Charlie. Charlie really comes off as this sinister character who makes several advances towards Fire in the very opening pages of getting to know her. The fact that he operates in this bar and is so forward with his advances at women has me really intrigued, but very scared at where some of the character elements are headed next for this individual. And I also really appreciated how Charlie was tied back to Rocky because I really do think it helps flesh out some of the ice plot threads in the series. And if the character of Charlie is really as bad as some of the pages may suggest, I think we're in for some really tense scenarios over in future issues of Fire and Ice. Welcome to Smallville. When Ice returns over from her beloved trip with Rocky, she's tormented by some of these social media hijinks that Fire is able to construct across this issue. Getting to see the way that Natacha Bustos is able to illustrate so many of these off the beaten path villains lent a really beautiful and wonderful sense of design over to this comic book. I do think it's interesting how Ice tried to see the good in the situation and ended up falling for Fire, explaining that the abundance of supervillains over at the salon is the result of a rehabilitation program for these characters. Of course, this devolves into some social media hijinks that ends up tying a really interesting Superman adjacent character back into the comic book series. I really love that this comic book series utilized this specific individual because this is a character who always adds an element of chaos to their stories. And I'm very interested in seeing what really interesting and dynamic plot elements that this Smallville-esque character will lend to future issues over in Fire and Ice. Getting to see that some of the ways Bustos designed some of these outfits across this series is really, really interesting. And again, I just think there is so much motion and texture across these pages. Over in that Ambush Bug page that we took a look at over in the very beginning of the review, Ambush Bug was bleeding out of two different spots over in the panel. I am very impressed with what Bustos and Starer are lending over to this comic book just from a technical perspective alone. So at the end of the day here, I really thought that Fire and Ice Welcome to Smallville issue 2 was a phenomenal comic book chapter over to a series that has a really interesting and unique vibe across other DC Comics titles. Getting to see how much characterization that Starer is able to lend to the individuals of Fire and Ice makes them really compelling as characters. I also like that Fire has kind of stuck to these social media aspects, which allow all these fun cameos over for DC villains and sort of off the beaten path characters. I thought there were so many wonderful sequences across this book over with Ambush Bug and Cheeks that really persist in the series after that first sequence. I also found the material with Ice to be really, really sweet, and I think this also contrasted so nicely with some of the sinister elements that Fire was working with over in the comic book title. I want to know from you, are you as interested in Fire and Ice Welcome to Smallville issue 2 as I was? Let me know down in the comments below. Thank you so much for coming to check out our follow-up review over on Fire and Ice, and we'll be back to see where DC Comics and these two characters are headed in the near future. Thanks so much, and I'll see you soon. Bye.